Hello everyone, I hope you're well. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Now I've had a busy 4 days and if I'm honest I'm absolutely shattered, but a happy shattered. So what I thought I would do is I'd come along, I just feel like a little bit of creative time, but I want to do something really simple, nothing too complicated. So just simple steps. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my bell stencil, which is SS27, and let's just move those out of the way. You can see with the bell you actually do get the cutout as well, just so that you can see that. So I'm going to take the bell and I'm going to have that sort of around about there, and it's lovely because it's 4 by 6 inches, which is the size, sorry, not that, the stencil's 4 by 4, the card is 4 by 6 inches, pink frog, super smooth, so the width of the stencil is perfect. Anybody would think I'd planned it. So I'm then going to add some low tack tape just at the top there, just so that I don't have any excess ink going anywhere that I don't want that. Some at the bottom as well. There we go. So let's just place that away. And then let me move the little bell. And then I'm just going to take some Salty Ocean Distress Oxide ink, and I'm going to use my smaller brushes. I've now got the packs of smaller brushes, and I'm going to take the Salty Ocean. So let's take lots of that Salty Ocean. And you can see I'm sort of priming the blending brush to make sure it's got lots of ink on there. Now if you hold your brush high up, you can get a nice soft blend, really soft, and you can come in and just add layers very gently if you wish, or you can bring your hand further down and then the colour is more intensified. So I'm just going to just lay down the colour. And I love a little bit of blending because it's nice and easy, you get beautiful results, and it's just about taking your time. And just like with your pencils, or even distress crayons, pencils, sorry, or anything that you're layering, it's about adding sort of layers of that colour and building it up nice and slowly. And it's no different with the oxides. I just like to build those layers up steadily. And that's just my first layer. I've then got one of my very tiny brushes for the darker colour, and the reason I'm using the very tiny brush, which is also in the smallest pack of blending brushes, is it prevents me from adding too much of that dark colour. And I'm starting here on the stencil, so let's just come in with that darker colour just to give me the darkest colour on the edge. And you can see that colour is on the stencil, so I continue to add that colour because it's on the stencil. So I can pick up a little bit more colour, but with it being a smaller blending brush, I'm not picking too much of that darker colour up. I can be quite precise how much of that dark colour I'm adding. So it means that I'm not adding too much of that. It's been a little bit more considered about the dark colour. And again, the brush works just as beautifully, whether it's the smaller one, the larger one, or whatever. And what I'm going to do is just take my time. Now I'm going to take the Distress Oxide again, Salty Ocean. And again, I'm applying that colour. And what I'm doing now is blending the darker colour, just as I would if I was using pencils. I come in with this lighter colour and blend that into my darker colour. So no different really than if I was using pencils. Just blending this lighter colour into that darker colour. And I personally think it's lovely just to take your time. I'm then going to come back with the blueprint sketch again, just with the darker colour, and I'm going to come in again. And we're just going to add another layer of that darker colour. And you're just taking your time in adding layers of that colour. I can be very specific with that fine blending brush. I'm just coming in with the blueprint sketch and just coming in a little bit darker with that blueprint sketch. Again, I'm going to blend into that with the lighter colour, the salty ocean. So I'm going to blend into that, just so that we don't have any harsh edges. And you can see how long I'm taking with that blending. And by going over the whole stencil, I'm picking up that ink and making sure I'm using all the ink from around the stencil as well. So you can see I'm actually adding more layers than I normally do, just to give me that beautiful, beautiful blend. Just take your time blending your inks. It is quite therapeutic. Just kicked my kitchen towel over. But it is quite therapeutic just blending that. And then I'm going to pick up all the ink from the stencil and just make sure that that is blended into my open area. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a fan brush. Now I like to use a fan brush because if I use water, then the splatters are a little bit more gentle. Let's just place them brushes on there. So I can pick up this water, take off the big splatters, and then I can just be quite mindful about adding delicate splatters. If you're not getting any water, just add a little bit more. Pick up the water, take off the big drops, and then you can come in and just add those little splatters of the water just with your fan brush. And it's entirely up to you how many times you actually splatter the water. The only thing you do need to do is you need to make sure that you just give that a few moments just to do its thing. You could put another piece of card on the top and you'd get another impression with the remainder of the ink that's around here. You can see it's actually bleaching out. I'll lift that up so you can see that a little bit better. Let's just... There we go. So you can see you've got those beautiful bleached out areas. So we'll take... Oh, come on, Tracy. you can take the low tack tape off there. And that's just made sure that I've got the top area masked off with the low tack tape. And then if you weren't happy, you could just lift it up and just have a look, see if you're happy. You could easily place it down again. So let's just remove that. Take our low tack tape off. And now I've got my beautiful bell just on there. Nice and simple. And again, you've got this ink on here that you could quite easily create another print with. So if you don't want to waste that ink, just create another print and it works really nicely. I just want to have a relaxing time and just concentrate on what I'm doing here. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to use, or try to use, TE50, which is on the wild side, and it's got some lovely trees for our sort of winter stamping. So let's use those. There we go. That's it. And then I'm going to use those trees. Now I want to decide if I want to use the larger tree. And do you know, I think I do. Or do I want to bring it down? So like how I can't make my mind up. So now I'm going to check whether I've actually cut out a bell mask. Don't know whether I have or not. Got the bird one. Hang on, what's that? There you go, I have. This is when I was doing workshop 1, 2, 1. So that's why I've got the masks already done, because I did them for workshop 1, 2, 1. So now I've got that aperture, a little bit bent, but there you go. I've got that aperture. Now I'm, you know, it's not the best cutting out in the world, but I've got the aperture and that will protect that area a little bit. So let's just make sure. Which way do you want it, Tracy? Honestly, faffing is one of my other hobbies. There we go. So I'm then going to take my acrylic block. Let's take the acrylic block, and I'm going to take Twilight ink, because it's dark but it's got those blue, that blue to it. Let's move these out of the way so you can actually see what I'm doing. And I'm going to turn that a little bit just so you can see. So I'm using my Twilight ink. Lots of tapping with that VersaFine Clair. Now here, let me just stamp it first. So I've got that masked off now, and I don't have to worry about over stamping in an area where I don't want to. So what you need to do is, you've got this oxide ink on here, and I hear lots of people saying, what do you stamp on to oxides with? I use the VersaFine Clair, but there are some things you need to remember. One, your card needs to be not soaking wet, or else that'll have an effect. If you're using a silhouette stamp, I would recommend you can use your stamping platform, because you can keep going over and over and over. If you're not using a stamp platform, then what I recommend is what I'm doing here is I'm giving the ink time. Sometimes we just lift that up too soon, and that's where our issues come. So just give that a little bit of time. because sometimes we're just in too much of a rush, and that has stamped perfectly. So half the problem is because we're in too much of a rush with things. That's the only reason why. So what I'm going to do is let's grab another piece of copier paper. And the only reason I'm grabbing a piece of copier paper is you can see here the bottom of the card is showing. So the bottom of the card is showing, and I don't want to get engrossed and stamp my tree onto there. So I'm then going to ink the stamp again. The other thing you need to be mindful of is when you're stamping onto the oxide background, what you do have to remember is that that surface is no longer porous. So because it's no longer porous, sometimes that VersaFine Clair will just sit on there and it's not dry. So you need to blot and then dry the ink. So just give that a little bit of time. Don't lift up too soon. Even when you're only stamping part of the stamp, just take your time. Again, no problem at all. Just wonderful. Let me just lift this out, and I'm going to lift this up so you can see that I'm not making that up. It's stamped beautifully. So in fact, I even saw that message today, and some lady was saying you can't stamp with VersaFine Clair onto oxides. Well, I do it all the time. So I'm going to ink again. So part of the problem is a lot of the time we're in a lot of rush. It's all about making something in 5 minutes, and it seems a popular thing that everything has to be made in 5 minutes. So that's part of the problem. So let's just add a few stems there. It's just having a little bit of patience, that's all. And just giving the ink time to do its job and not rushing and lifting it up too quickly. There we go. So we can move this away. And then on this side, let's have a look. Let's just ink that again. I have to be mindful, because I've not masked anything off, about those open areas, you know, at the top and the bottom of the card. So just be mindful of that. I don't know whether, let me just have a look at that. Honestly, nobody faffs like I do. No, I'm going to leave it at that, even though I've just inked that stamp. So let's just give that a clean so that we haven't got that wet ink just sitting on there. There we go. Beautiful. And we're just going for a nice, simple design. Nothing too complicated. I'll just put this back in place again. And then I'm going to go back to the stamp where we've taken the tree from. You've also got a smaller tree on there, so you could stamp round the edges, but I'm going to use this here, this little one here. Isn't it funny? I've got like a light on, and I don't know whether, I was wondering whether it was a bit dusty, but I don't know whether it is. But I've got this stamp here as well, same from the same set, TE50. Now I can see that ink shining on there, so I know that that's going to need to be blotted and then dried. Let's just move that out of the way. This could have gone onto a smaller acrylic block, but I'm going to add And if you'd have put it on a smaller acrylic block, it'd have been so much easier, because then you wouldn't have had to bother with the copier paper. Let's place that there. So if I'd have used a smaller acrylic block, I wouldn't need to have put that copier paper there. But even with that stamp that's just, you know, got little detail on there, I'm still giving that time just to sort of make an impression on the card. And I've cut my aperture from copier paper because you don't want a big bulky piece, because that will cause you a ridge. So let's take this out of the way. Move these out of the way. We'll just take some water to make sure our brush, let's make sure our hands and our brush is clean. So this is a round brush, number 5, but it's got a reasonable size to it, but it holds quite a bit of moisture because it's that round brush. So what I can do is, let's bring in the kitchen roll just to make sure, you know, we're not overly soaking everything. And then I can come into this and just make that bleed a little bit, just with that moisture. Just so that that bleeds out a little bit. So I'm being very careful. I'm not sort of flooding the area. I'm just softening the edges a little bit. And we're using that oxide, and because we're using that oxide, the ink will react to the moisture. So it'll just give me a little bit of a subtle halo around the bell. And I can see the subtlety of that, but it might be a little bit difficult in camera. So it's still not quite dark enough for me. So what I'm going to do is take the Salty Ocean, which is the lightest colour, and I'm going to pick that up with my round brush. Now there's already moisture in there, so it should move quite nicely. Let's go all the way up to the top, take off the excess, and then just blend that out. Just blend it out to nothing. Let's have some fresh water. So you can just make sure it blends out a little bit. So when you've used most of the colour, just blend out the edges, because you just want that nice gentle colour around the edge. And when you if you feel it's running away with you, just dab that on your kitchen roll. Now don't forget, we're not going for something overly complicated here. You're just going for something quite simple. Let's just, there we go. So I'm just using that tinted water now, just to drag it out a little bit more, just so it looks a little bit more natural, not too regimental. So let's bring this up just so you can see the beautiful bell, and you can see the moisture there in the background on the card. Just lovely. So what I'm going to do then is I want to find a fine brush, and it's hilarious because if I want to find a fine brush, I'm telling you now, I won't be able to. No, I can't even read that writing on there, but it looks fine-ish. You too can spend a week looking for a fine brush. I mean, I'm sitting here saying I'm looking for a fine brush. Look at this. Look at this. How many fine brushes do you want, woman? I want it fine, but a little bit stumpy as well. Does that make sense? That's a technical term because I'm so professional. So that's a nice fine brush there, look. I'm afraid I don't spend a fortune on fine brushes. I'm terrible. So what I'm going to do is, I've got my bleed proof Dr. PH bleed proof white. It does exactly what it says on the tin. It's bleed proof. So it's a bit hard. So I'm just going to place, nobody needs that much, but I'm going to place that little bit on there. Now you can add this to a container and then you can reactivate it. So let's move that out of the way. So I'm going to add a little bit of water because that's not going to do anything. Let's just get that nice pigment. We don't want any lumps, which is exactly what I've got now, lumps. I've got way too much moisture on there. I can't work like that. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of the white, just make sure. And then I'm going to go on top of the trees, just with a little bit of the white. Now I don't want to I don't want it to be too diluted. So I'm just adding a little bit of white because you want to have that sort of snowy feel to your design. I'm just adding a little bit of the white. I'm just sort of sweeping that across the trees, just to give that sense of, you know, that it's quite frosty, but I still want some of the tree to be visible. So here I've diluted it a little bit too much. So I'm just picking up a little bit more of that pure pigment. But when you add a little bit, I can't pick it up, a little bit of the white, it really does make it instantly appear more frosty. And then we'll just continue to add this. Now, if you want to see a wonderful demonstration, you should pop by my group on Facebook, and the lovely Lisa Magical Maker created a wonderful hot air balloon yesterday from one of my stencils, and it was just amazing, absolutely amazing. It was fantastic. So if you want to be inspired further, I can't recommend enough that you take a look. Try not to, for me personally, I try not to draw this, like, you see where the line is on my tree? I don't try to sort of do that perfectly. I sort of add some blobbiness as well. I'm trying to describe that in a term that is a little bit more simplified. You know, I'm not doing exactly the way the stamp is, because snow doesn't fall. You know, it's not perfect, doesn't fall so that it's, I mean, it looks beautiful when it's on the branches, but you have blobs of it, lumps of it, drifts of it. So you want to sort of, well, I do personally, I like it a little bit more natural looking, as if I've got blobs and dots and lots of different Now the thing you'll find with the bleed proof is it does exactly as it says on the tin. It means that it doesn't pick up that colour from the oxide. So it doesn't go sort of a bluey colour. So it doesn't, because this is wet medium, the oxide isn't showing through that. So it's a beautiful product to use. So let's just add a little bit there, because you've got the trunk. The only problem I find is I could literally spend all day, honestly, all day, I'm not joking, just adding bits of frost and snow to a tree. Doesn't take much to amuse me. But you've got that sort of more frosty feel to that now. You've got that white on there. So the other thing, where have I just missed one? And again, I'm still a great believer in layers. By adding some layers to that, it just gives it a little bit more texture, as if it is sort of a snowdrift rather than, you know, a shower and it's just all watery. By adding those layers, it gives that feel. I'm then going to, I've now got hiccups, add a little dot just to each of these. I'm going to take forever just to add that little dot. But the bleed proof is just wonderful, particularly if you've used those oxides. The only thing I would say is when you're using the bleed proof, you really do need to make sure that you wash your brush out, because whatever you use after that with the same brush, you know, it's going to affect that colour. So just be mindful of that. So lovely. I don't want to waste that. I really should have some water. Let me just clean that a little bit so it's just not sitting in there. Now what I'm going to try and do is work with that there. But can you see? It just gives it more of that snowy feel. Now I've done nothing complicated. I've stamped, I've inked, I've blended, and that's it. Nothing complicated. I'm then going to take TE44. And of course, TE44 has got the little bells here. They're exactly the same shape as this is. Anybody think I'd thought about that? Every now and then, I have half a brain. Right. So I'm going to take those bells, and let's try and remember to use a little acrylic block. I'm going to try and do it without wasting this paint here, which is going to be easy, and so that you can see it as well. So I'm going to use my VersaFine Clair Twilight again. It's quite nice, it's with it being a blue rather than the black. So I've got the Twilight, and then I'm going to add the bells there. So let's add them there. And you can see, even when I'm going on to the white card, which is more absorbent, I still don't rush that. I still give that time just to make the impression. I don't sort of rush the process. I still take my time. There we go. Now we can extend the bells. So let's extend the bells. And I'm going to use the Twilight once again. And again, I didn't leave my ink pad so that we didn't get excess ink on my acrylic block. So then I'm just going to turn this a little bit, just so that we extend those bells. And we'll clean that up straight away so that that doesn't leave a mark on there. And then again, we can come in and we can use our bleed proof again. So this has got the moisture in there, and I'll just pick a little bit more of that pigment up. And then I'm just going to add a little touch of the white, just so that the recipient will be able to see. And I'll lift this up just so that you can see as well. You don't want to eliminate the actual bells themselves, but we're just creating a little bit of that there. So you're not eliminating it completely. And obviously I'll probably dangle the bell from there as well, but I could do this all day long. So let's just, I do just like to, now I've tried to make the effort and get some half decent brushes, I do like to try and make sure that I do clean them. I know it's rare for me. We could have also used that for our splatters, but we'll worry about that later. So what I'm going to do then is I've now got in the shop the snowflakes distress, and it's actually glitter and mica flakes, so it's both mixed in. Let's have a look. There you go, you've got them both in there. Nice bit of twinkle. And I've also got texture paste twinkle in the shop as well, just so that you can add that twinkle by adding texture paste through things like your snowman. So you could add the twinkle texture paste, you could even spritz some colour as you've put that twinkle texture paste on there. And what I'm going to do is just to add a little bit of texture, I'm going to take my adhesive, and because it's in this glue container, it makes it a little bit easier for me to direct that glue exactly where I want it. Now I'm trying not to be too regimented, and what I find is if you go a little bit quicker, it's just a little bit more natural than trying to do one dollop here and one dollop there. So let's move this out of the way and let's bring in the copier paper. And what I'm going to do is just go for it. I'm just going to sprinkle this on here. And then I'm just going to give that a little pat, like you do, just so that it makes contact with that adhesive, rather than just fall straight off, because you've got some, you've got some snowflakes in here. Nice bit of twinkle on there, and that will give some texture as well. Oh yes, we've definitely got some texture and twinkle. Obviously your adhesive needs to dry, and if you want to, you can pick up a little bit more of those snowflakes. That's what I like. So the bigger pieces you can just pick up, and if you think, oh no, I want a bit more and I need a little bit more attaching to the glue, just dab that down again. Don't forget you've got the glitter and mica flakes in this. Oh, and I've got some beautiful twinkle on there, and I've got some twinkle on here because your ink's still wet a little bit, so you've got beautiful twinkle on there. Now you're only going to need one pot. It's going to last you years. There we go. I've still got beautiful twinkle all round here as well. I'm going to lift this up just so you can see the twinkle. Let's look at the bells at the top. Look at the bells at the top. They've got the twinkle on there. And then you've got the snowflakes on there. Look at the twinkle on the trees. Now, then it looks really Christmassy. Just lovely. How lovely. It just looks nice and Christmassy. And I've not done anything overly complicated at all. So it's just beautiful. So what I want to do then is you could have Mr. Snowman just standing down here and looking up at the bell. But I'm going to have the little bird looking at that bell. You could quite easily have the bird in the bell, but I do that quite frequently. So I'm going to take the bird, and obviously I want him stamping in black. So let's stamp that in black. There we go. That's my Nocturne ink. And then I'm going to add the little bird down here. It does work rather lovely on those trees. Just a really nice shape. So what I'm going to do then is you could either use your blending brushes just to add a little bit of the blue underneath the bird. Now we don't want to use that one because I think this might, no, it hasn't got enough water in. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of that blue, take a little bit of that moisture off, and I'm just going to ground the bird a little bit, just so that it doesn't look like the poor little thing is just sitting there and floating in midair. And then if I want it a little bit darker, let's grab that a little bit darker. And then a little bit darker there. That's it. Just so that we've got our little bird on there. You could easily add some of your mica flakes around the card if you wish as well. I'm then going to take, where have you gone? Where's my micron pen? I spend my life looking for pens. And I'm then just going to just add a little twiddly bit to represent that the bell is not just floating as well, because I don't want that just floating. Now there's another lovely card I did with the bell that was in workshop 121, and I said I was going to get it ready. Do you know, I didn't. So let me see if I can sort of scroll through my photos really quickly and get to them cards. I can try, can't I? So just sing amongst yourselves, just whilst I find. The problem is I've got that many photos of the garden, projects, everything else. It's like, and if I wasn't recording a video, I could guarantee that I would find it the first time. We should be, here you go. Here's a couple of bell ones for you. So this is in workshop 121, and I've used the bell from TE41 here and used the bell. That just looks so cool. And let me find you another one with the bell. I did one with the acorns as well. Look at that. Oh, love it. Right, so I'm just going to find the other bell one for you, which could take a while. Should be any moment. Where are you? There it is. And then this is the other one I created. And that's with the poinsettia, which just gives you another idea as well. And that was in workshop 121 as well. But just some different ideas for you. But this is just nice and simple, nothing too complicated. So I don't think there's anything on there, is there? So let's just put that one back. And then I've got some sentiments. I think it's TE22 or 18, one of them. Let's have a look. There we go. So we'll just pull these out. And we've got Celebrate the Season on TE18. Winter Wishes on I quite like the Winter Wishes, which is quite nice because even if you wanted to send it as a birthday card, you could just put Winter Wishes, couldn't you? Right. I'll just flick everything everywhere. So let's use this Winter Wishes. And then I want a scrap of white card, which is never where you want it. Nobody knows what I did with this small acrylic block. I soon lose it. Actually, I might leave that there a minute. What did I do with that small acrylic block? Did I put it back? So we've got Winter Wishes here. And I'm going to place that on to a piece of white card. And I'm going to use Twilight for that. So let's use Twilight. This is just a scrap of card that was left over. Again, I don't need to press very hard with that. Place that back. I am trying to be good and place things back, but it doesn't last very long. We'll cut out our wording. Obviously you can cut your wording out on your cutters if you wish. And then it's just deciding where you want your sentiment. See, I don't want to put anything across here because it splits the trees and I really don't want to do that. You can have it at the bottom if you wish. That doesn't appeal to me either. So I'm going to add mine as if the Winter Wishes text is holding the bells in place. So let's take, there we go. So as if that's holding that in place. There we go. And just give that a little bit of time. Now I'm going to just come in with a little bit of Salty Ocean. Just going to pick that up. Just take off the excess water. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of that blending just under there. Just in the blue. Take off a little bit of the extra moisture. If it's too wet for you, just take that off. And then blend that into nothing. There we go. Just so that that's blended underneath there. Now you can use your bleed proof white just to add your splatters. I'm just going to use my Posca pen. I can't, because I've already got some beautiful texture on there, I can't actually see. Because obviously I've got the twinkle on there. I've already got white paint on that. That's it, I can see it now. There we go. And really, we should let that dry. Just going to give those hands a clean. But now you can see you've got the white, you've got some splatters, you've got the twinkle, and it just then looks lovely. So, and then you could quite easily come and put some more foliage if you want, but I wanted to keep that quite simple. I've then got a piece of card. So this that I've worked on is 4x6. I've then got another piece of Pink Frog Super Smooth card, 4 1/4 by 6 1/4. And what I'm going to do is just go down the edges with my blueprint sketch. And obviously you could mop this blueprint sketch up with another piece of card. I'm afraid I'm not going to do that, but you could. You could quite easily, if you're having a little creative time, you could mop this up with another piece of card and you would have another beautiful background for a Christmas card. I'm then going to use my fan brush just to add some splatters to the edge of that card, just because it's just more in keeping then. It's got that snowy effect just around the edges. Let's go round, turn it round again. But it just means that when we give it a little bit of time, we'll have that little bit of a bleached out, and it looks more effective against the card that we've created. So if I was going to say, if I try to find a dry area on this kitchen towel, trust me, it isn't very. So I've now got a few little bleached areas out on the background. It's as if I've designed my own background paper. So I'm then going to use my adhesive, and we've got no dimension on there, so it's perfect for posting. The only dimension you've got there is from a little bit of the snowflakes and the sentiment, nothing else. But then I've got my own background piece that coordinates perfectly with the focal image, because that colour is on there also. Let's just, you could also, even if you wanted to change it up, say you were doing a batch of card making, you could then add a little bit of text down the side if you wanted to. I'm then going to add this to a 5x7 card. Let's make sure that's facing the right way. Now I think then you've got a card that you could send to anyone. And what you could do is, one night you could do the blending on 5 cards. Another night you could stamp the trees on 5 cards. You know, and before you know it, you'd have 5 cards done and in your little box, ready for Christmas. Even if you're just sending someone just to say you're thinking of them. There we go. Let's take this. That's it. And that is our little card finished. Nice and simple, but really effective. So I hope you've enjoyed that and you'll give that a go. Love to all, and I'll see you all soon. Bye for now.